They say teaching high school English prepares you for anything life throws at you. 39 years of existence, 15 of them spent decoding teenage drama and grading essays about summer vacations, and I thought I had seen every variety of human deception. Turns out, I was wrong. My name is Thomas Grady, and 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife Elise had been treating our marriage like a creative writing assignment, heavy on fiction, light on truth. The discovery came on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Tuesdays are supposed to be boring. They are the day when nothing significant happens, when you grade papers and wonder if your students actually read The Great Gatsby, or just watched the movie. But this Tuesday, while looking for our joint account statements to pay the mortgage, I found something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the woman I had been married to for 12 years. Hidden behind our tax documents was a hotel keycard clipped to a medical conference badge. Dr. Ryan Dorsey, Emergency Medicine, it read. The same Dr. Dorsey who worked at City General Hospital, where my wife Elise managed human resources. The same Dr. Dorsey who, according to my sister Molly, had a reputation for bedside manner that extended well beyond patient care. I sat in my home office, staring at that keycard like it was a particularly challenging essay question, the kind that requires you to analyze character motivation and plot development. Except this time, I was both the reader and the unwitting character in someone else's story. "Tom, dinner's ready," Elise called from downstairs, her voice carrying that perfect blend of domestic warmth that had fooled me for months. I slipped the keycard into my wallet and headed downstairs, where my wife of 12 years was setting the table with the same precision she brought to everything else in her life. Elise Grady was 37, blonde, and possessed the kind of organized efficiency that made her excellent at managing hospital staff and, apparently, managing a double life. "How was school today?" she asked, not looking up from arranging the silverware. "Educational," I replied, watching her face for any sign of guilt. Nothing. She had the emotional range of a hospital administrator, which, coincidentally, she was. "The Morrison account called about the quarterly reports," she continued, referring to her work with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for discussing the weather. "We need to review the budget allocations for next month." We. Always we, when it came to her work decisions, but somehow my teaching salary was our money, while her hospital management income remained mysteriously separate. I had been contributing every paycheck to our joint account for 3 years, while Elise maintained her own private account for professional expenses. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Speaking of accounts," I said, cutting into the chicken she had prepared with her usual mechanical precision, "I noticed some unusual activity on our joint statement." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Just for a second, but I caught it. 15 years of watching teenagers lie about homework assignments had trained me to notice these micro-expressions. "What kind of activity?" she asked. "Large withdrawal, $5,000. Ring any bells?" "Oh, that." She waved her hand dismissively. "Hospital equipment for the new wing. I had to cover some expenses up front. I'll be reimbursed next week." Another lie. I knew because I had already called the bank. The withdrawal had been transferred to her private account, not to City General Hospital. But I kept my expression neutral, nodding as if her explanation made perfect sense. "Of course," I said. "Just wanted to make sure our finances were in order." That night, while Elise slept beside me with the peaceful expression of someone whose conscience was either clear or completely absent, I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. I had always been better at long-term strategy than immediate action. It came from years of designing semester-long curricula and managing classroom dynamics. The next morning, I called my sister Molly during my lunch break. Molly worked as a nurse at City General, which made her an invaluable source of hospital gossip. She also had the kind of protective instincts that made her dangerous when someone threatened her family. "Tom, what's wrong?" she asked immediately. Molly could read mood changes over the phone better than I could read them in person. "I need you to tell me everything you know about Dr. Ryan Dorsey." Silence. Then, "Oh, Tommy, no." "Oh, Tommy, yes. What do you know?" "He's trouble. Divorced twice, currently married to wife number 3. Has a reputation for extracurricular activities with hospital staff. Why are you asking?" I told her about the keycard, about the mysterious withdrawals, about the late nights and weekend emergencies that had become increasingly frequent in Elise's schedule. "I'm going to end him," Molly said, her voice taking on the tone she used with difficult patience. "No, you're not." "I am. But I need information first. Can you find out about his schedule, his habits, where he goes for lunch?" "Tommy, what are you planning?" "Something educational." That afternoon, I drove to City General Hospital and parked across the street. I felt ridiculous, like a character in one of those detective novels my students sometimes chose for their independent reading projects. But ridiculous or not, I needed to see for myself. At 12:30 p.m., Dr. Ryan Dorsey emerged from the hospital's main entrance. He was tall, confident, and walked with the kind of swagger that suggested he believed his own press releases. He was also holding hands with my wife. They walked 2 blocks to Antonio's, a small Italian restaurant that Elise had never mentioned, despite apparently being a regular customer. Through the window, I watched them share lunch with the easy intimacy of people who had done this many times before. I took pictures, not because I planned to use them in divorce court, but because I needed proof that this was really happening, that my marriage had become a performance where I was the only one who didn't know I was acting. When they finished lunch, Dorsey walked Elise back to the hospital. But instead of going to her office in the administrative wing, she followed him to the staff parking garage. They stood next to his Tesla for 10 minutes, talking and laughing like teenagers. Then she got in. I followed them to the Marriott downtown, the same hotel whose keycard I had found in our tax documents. They emerged 2 hours later, Elise checking her phone and smoothing her hair with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this before, many times before. I drove home and sat in my kitchen, staring at the photographs on my phone. My wife, the woman who had shared my bed for 12 years, the woman who reminded me to take my vitamins and complained about my grading papers at the kitchen table, was having an affair with a man who drove a car worth more than my annual salary. But what bothered me more than the betrayal was the realization that she thought I was stupid enough not to figure it out, that she had been treating me like one of my slower students, someone who needed simple explanations and couldn't handle complex concepts. That night I checked our joint account online. Another withdrawal. $3,000 this time, also transferred to her private account. When I confronted her about it, she claimed it was for professional development courses. "You know, Tom," she said, not looking up from her laptop, "you really should focus more on your own career development instead of micromanaging our finances. Maybe if you put as much energy into advancing at school as you do into questioning every expense, we'd be in better shape financially." The condescension in her voice was new, or maybe I was just hearing it clearly for the first time. She was talking to me like I was a child who didn't understand adult responsibilities, like I was the problem in our marriage. "You're right," I said. "I should focus more on my career." She smiled, probably thinking she had successfully deflected my attention. But what she didn't realize was that my career had taught me patience, strategy, and the importance of long-term planning. It had also taught me that the most effective lessons were the ones students discovered for themselves. I was about to give Elise and Dr. Ryan Dorsey a very educational experience. The next morning, I did something I had never done in 15 years of teaching. I used a personal day to conduct reconnaissance. I told the substitute I had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. My family was definitely experiencing an emergency, Elise just didn't know it yet. I started at Brewster's Coffee, the place where all the hospital staff grabbed their morning caffeine fix. Mrs. Brewster, the owner, was 73 years old and had been collecting gossip like baseball cards since before I was born. She also happened to be our next-door neighbor. "Tommy Grady," she said as I walked in, "what brings you here on a school day?" "Professional development," I said, ordering a large coffee, "researching local businesses for a student project." It was amazing how easily lies came once you started practicing. Maybe I had learned more from my wife than I thought. "Well, you picked the right place," Mrs. Brewster said, leaning across the counter conspiratorially. "This place sees more drama than a soap opera. Just yesterday, that friend of Elise's, Tasha, was in here bragging about some new romance. Said her friend had found herself a real doctor this time, someone who could appreciate quality." Tasha Morrison was Elise's best friend and a real estate agent who specialized in expensive properties and other people's business. She was also the kind of person who couldn't keep a secret if her commission depended on it. "That's nice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Good for her friend." Mrs. Brewster nodded. "Though between you and me, I think it's a shame when people don't appreciate what they already have at home." The look she gave me suggested that Mrs. Brewster knew exactly which friend Tasha had been discussing. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone else's business, sometimes before the people involved figured it out themselves. I spent the rest of the morning at the public library, using their computers to research Dr. Ryan Dorsey. What I found was enlightening. 2 previous divorces, both citing irreconcilable differences, a malpractice lawsuit that had been settled out of court, and a disciplinary hearing 3 years ago regarding inappropriate workplace relationships. Dr. Dorsey had a pattern, and my wife was just the latest chapter in a very predictable story. At lunch, I drove back to City General and positioned myself in the parking garage. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:15, Elise's Honda Civic pulled into a space next to Dorsey's Tesla. She got out, looked around to make sure no one was watching, then got into his car. This time, they didn't go to a restaurant. They drove straight to the Marriott. I followed them and parked where I could see the hotel entrance. While I waited, I called Adam Peterson, one of my former students who now worked in the hospital's IT department. Adam had been a quiet kid in high school, the type who was better with computers than people. He had also been grateful when I helped him through a difficult time with bullies his senior year. "Mr. Grady?" Adam sounded surprised to hear from me. "Hey, Adam, I hope you don't mind me calling. I have a favor to ask, and it's a bit unusual." "Sure. What do you need?" "I'm trying to verify some information about hospital staff schedules, specifically Dr. Dorsey in emergency medicine. Would it be possible to check when he's been logging in and out of the system?" There was a pause. "Is this for official business?" "It's personal, Adam. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Another pause. Then, "Give me an hour. I'll call you back." Adam called back with information that confirmed what I already suspected. For the past 6 months, Dr. Dorsey had been taking extended lunch breaks 3 days a week. His keycard showed him leaving the hospital at noon and returning around 3 p.m., but his schedule indicated he was supposed to be on duty. "There's something else," Adam said. "His keycard has been accessing the administrative wing after hours, usually around 7 p.m. when most of the office staff has gone home." The administrative wing, where Elise worked. "Adam, I need one more favor. Can you check the parking garage security footage for those times?" "Mr. Grady, I could get in trouble for that." "I understand. But Adam, remember when those kids were making your life miserable senior year? Remember what we talked about then? That sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." "Exactly. This is me standing up for what's right." That evening, Adam sent me security footage that showed exactly what I expected to see. Elise and Dorsey meeting in the parking garage after hours, going to his car, and returning an hour later, looking appropriately disheveled. But the footage also showed something I hadn't expected. Tasha Morrison, waiting by Elise's car one evening, apparently serving as a lookout. My wife's affair wasn't just a secret romance. It was a coordinated operation with support staff. I spent that night making copies of everything. The bank records showing the mysterious transfers, the photographs from the restaurant and hotel, the security footage Adam had provided. I organized it all in a folder labeled Professional Development, which seemed appropriately ironic. The next day, I returned to school and taught my classes with renewed energy. My students noticed the change. "Mr. Grady seems different today," I heard Jessica Martinez whisper to her friend during third period. "Like, more focused or something." She was right. I was focused. For the first time in months, I had a clear objective and a plan to achieve it. I was going to teach my wife and her boyfriend a lesson they would never forget. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of their deception. That evening, while Elise was at another hospital emergency, I went through our financial records more carefully. What I found was worse than I had imagined. Over the past 6 months, Elise had transferred nearly $20,000 from our joint account to her private account. Money I had earned grading papers and teaching teenagers about the importance of honesty and integrity. She had also been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts that had never made it home. When I looked at the dates, they corresponded perfectly with her work emergencies and professional development activities. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was funding it with my money. I made copies of all the financial records and added them to my growing collection of evidence. Then I did something that would have made my students proud. I started planning an essay. Not the kind I usually assigned, but a narrative with a clear thesis, supporting evidence, and a conclusion that would leave no room for misinterpretation. The thesis was simple. Actions have consequences. The supporting evidence was comprehensive and damning. And the conclusion? That was going to be the most educational part of all. Friday morning, I implemented Phase 1 of what I had started thinking of as the Dorsey Education Project. I arrived at school early and used the faculty computer to create a new email account under the name Concerned Colleague 2024. Then, I composed a carefully worded message to Dr. Patricia Landon, Chief of Staff at City General Hospital. The email was brief and professional. "Dr. Landon, I thought you should be aware of some concerning patterns in Dr. Dorsey's schedule and behavior that may be affecting patient care and department morale. I'm happy to provide more specific information if you're interested in addressing this matter discreetly." I didn't send it immediately. Instead, I saved it as a draft and turned my attention to my first period class where we were discussing character motivation in The Scarlet Letter. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Can anyone tell me why Hawthorne chose to make Hester's punishment so public?" I asked my students. Jennifer Walsh raised her hand. "Because private shame doesn't really change behavior. People only learn when there are real consequences that everyone can see." "Excellent point, Jennifer. And what about the other characters? What motivates their actions?" "They're all hypocrites," said Mike Thompson, a kid who usually spent more time sleeping than participating. "They pretend to be moral, but they're just as messed up as everyone else. They just hide it better." "So what would happen if their secrets were exposed?" "Their whole world would fall apart," Mike continued, suddenly engaged, "because their reputation is all they really have." I smiled. Sometimes the best lessons came from unexpected sources. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital again, but this time I had a different objective. Instead of surveillance, I was conducting what teachers call formative assessment, checking to see if my students were ready for the final exam. I parked in the visitor lot and walked into the hospital lobby like I belonged there. Confidence I had learned from years of classroom management was 90% of successful authority. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where the administrative offices were located, and walked casually down the hallway until I found Elise's office. The nameplate on the door read, "Elise Grady, Human Resources Manager." Seeing my own last name associated with her deception felt like a personal insult. "Can I help you?" asked a young woman sitting at a desk outside Elise's office. "I'm Tom Grady, Elise's husband," I said with my most charming smile. "I wanted to surprise her for lunch, but it looks like she's not in." "Oh, Mr. Grady!" The woman, whose nameplate identified her as Karina Santos, lit up with recognition. "Elise talks about you all the time. She's in a meeting with Dr. Dorsey right now, but she should be back soon. Would you like to wait?" "A meeting with Dr. Dorsey?" I kept my voice casual, curious, rather than suspicious. "That's the emergency medicine doctor, right?" "Yes, they've been working on some new protocols for staff scheduling. Very intensive project. They meet almost every day now." "How dedicated of them." "Well, I don't want to interrupt important work. Maybe I'll surprise her at home instead." Karina smiled. She's lucky to have such a thoughtful husband. If she only knew how thoughtful I was being. I left the hospital and drove to the Marriott, where I had a brief conversation with the desk clerk. I explained that I was planning a surprise anniversary party for my wife and her colleague, and wondered if I could confirm their usual room reservation for next week. "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith," the clerk said without hesitation. "They're some of our most regular guests. Would you like me to upgrade them to a suite for the special occasion?" Mr. and Mrs. Smith. How original. "That's very kind, but I think they prefer their usual arrangement. What room do they typically use?" "Room 412. They always request it specifically, something about the view." I thanked the clerk and left, adding this information to my growing file. My wife and her boyfriend were creatures of habit, which was going to make the final phase of their education much easier to orchestrate. That evening, Elise came home later than usual, claiming that her protocol meeting had run long. "How's the project going?" I asked over dinner. "Oh, you know how these things are. Lots of details to work out. Dr. Dorsey is very thorough in his approach." "I'll bet he is," I thought. "Will you be working late again next week?" "Probably. We're at a critical stage, but it should be finished soon." She was right about that. It would definitely be finished soon. Saturday morning, while Elise was at her yoga class, or at least that's where she claimed to be going, I implemented Phase 2 of the project. I sent the email to Dr. Landon, then drove to Tasha Morrison's real estate office. Tasha was showing a house, according to her assistant, but would be back within the hour. I waited in the parking lot, using the time to review my notes and prepare for what teachers call differentiated instruction, tailoring the lesson to the specific student. When Tasha returned, I followed her into the office. "Tom Grady," she said, clearly surprised to see me. "What brings you here? Are you and Elise finally ready to upgrade to a bigger house?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Elise. I'm planning a surprise for her, and I could use your help." Tasha's expression shifted slightly. "What kind of surprise?" "Well, I know she's been working very hard lately, especially on this new project with Dr. Dorsey. I thought it might be nice to do something special to show my appreciation." "That's sweet of you, Tom. The thing is, I want to make sure I time it right. I wouldn't want to interrupt one of their important meetings. You know how dedicated Elise is to her work." Tasha nodded, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was fishing for. "Maybe you could help me understand her schedule better? I know you two talk regularly." "Tom, I think you should discuss Elise's schedule with Elise." "Of course. It's just that she's been so stressed lately, and I hate to bother her with party planning on top of everything else. But you're right. I should talk to her directly." I stood to leave, then turned back as if something had just occurred to me. "Oh, one more thing. Do you know if Dr. Dorsey has any food allergies? I was thinking of including him in the surprise, since they've been working so closely together." Tasha's face went pale. I don't know anything about Dr. Dorsey's dietary restrictions." "No problem. I'll figure it out. Thanks for your time, Tasha." I left her sitting at her desk, probably reaching for her phone to call Elise before I even made it to my car, which was exactly what I wanted her to do. Phase 3 of the Dorsey education project was about to begin, and I wanted all the participants to be properly prepared for the final examination. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning. I was in the kitchen, grading papers and drinking coffee, when Elise's phone rang. She answered it in the bedroom, but I could hear her voice through the thin walls of our house. "What do you mean, an investigation?" she said, her voice tight with panic. "What kind of investigation?" I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could fill in the blanks. Dr. Landon had received my email and had apparently decided to look into Dr. Dorsey's recent behavior patterns. "No, we can't meet today," Elise continued. "It's too risky. We need to be careful until this blows over." When she came downstairs, her face was composed, but I could see the stress in the way she held her shoulders. "Everything okay?" I asked, not looking up from the essays I was grading. "Just work drama. You know how hospitals can be." I made a non-committal sound and continued reading about why Holden Caulfield was a relatable character to modern teenagers. The irony of reading about phoniness while sitting across from my wife wasn't lost on me. "I might need to work late this week," Elise said, pouring herself coffee with hands that shook slightly. "There are some personnel issues that need to be addressed." "Take all the time you need," I said. "I understand how important your work is." She looked at me sharply, as if trying to determine whether there was hidden meaning in my words. But I kept my expression neutral, the same face I used when students tried to convince me their dog had eaten their homework. That afternoon, I received a text from Adam. "Dr. D called in sick today, first time in 2 years. Thought you'd want to know." Dr. Dorsey was running scared. Good. Fear made people sloppy, and sloppy people made mistakes. I spent my lunch period making phone calls. The first was to Rick Martinez, my friend who taught gym and coached the basketball team. Rick had the kind of straightforward personality that made him terrible at keeping secrets, but excellent at spreading information. "Rick, I need a favor. Can you mention to your wife that there might be some interesting drama at the hospital this week? Something about a doctor and inappropriate workplace relationships?" "Tom, what are you up to?" "Educational outreach. Maria works in billing, right? She'll hear about it anyway, but a little advance notice might help her connect the dots." Maria Martinez worked in the hospital's billing department and was married to the hospital's unofficial information network. If I wanted news to spread quickly through the medical center, Maria was the perfect starting point. My second call was to Mrs. Brewster. "Mrs. Brewster, I wanted to give you a heads up. There might be some unusual activity at the hospital this week. If anyone asks you about conversations you might have overheard at the coffee shop, you should feel free to share what you know." "Tommy, are you finally doing something about your situation?" So she had known all along. I shouldn't have been surprised. "I'm handling it, Mrs. Brewster, but I appreciate your discretion." "Discretion is overrated, honey. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their choices." That evening, Elise came home in a state of barely controlled anxiety. She spent most of dinner checking her phone and jumping every time it made a sound. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked. "It's just work stress. There's been some gossip going around, people spreading rumors about staff members. It's very unprofessional." "What kind of rumors?" She hesitated, probably trying to decide how much to tell me. "Someone has been making accusations about doctors having inappropriate relationships with administrative staff." "That sounds serious. Is there any truth to the rumors?" "Of course not," she said quickly. "It's just someone trying to cause trouble. But you know how these things can spiral out of control, even when they're completely baseless." I nodded sympathetically. Hospital politics can be brutal. I'm glad I work in education, where people are more straightforward with each other. The look she gave me suggested she wasn't sure whether I was being sincere or sarcastic. Join the club, I thought. I wasn't entirely sure myself anymore. Tuesday brought developments that exceeded my expectations. Adam sent me another text. Dr. D suspended pending investigation. Security escorted him out this morning, whole hospital talking about it. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Karina Santos, Elise's assistant, called me at school. "Mr. Grady, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the faculty directory. I wanted to talk to you about something, but I wasn't sure who else to contact." "What's on your mind, Karina?" "It's about Mrs. Grady and Dr. Dorsey. I think there might be something you should know." We agreed to meet at Brewster's Coffee after school. When I arrived, Karina was already there, looking nervous but determined. "I've been working for Mrs. Grady for 2 years," she began. "She's always been professional, but lately things have been different." "Different how?" "The meetings with Dr. Dorsey. They weren't about staff protocols. I know because I handle all of Mrs. Grady's scheduling, and there was never any official project involving emergency medicine protocols." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "These are copies of emails and calendar entries. I probably shouldn't be showing you this, but after what happened to Dr. Dorsey today, I think someone needs to know the truth." The folder contained printouts of email exchanges between Elise and Dorsey that were definitely not about work protocols. There were also calendar entries for meetings at times and locations that corresponded exactly with my surveillance notes. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because Mrs. Grady threw Dr. Dorsey under the bus today. When Dr. Landon called her in for questioning, she claimed he had been harassing her and that she was afraid to report it because of his position in the hospital. She made it sound like she was the victim." I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Not only was Elise cheating on me, but she was now trying to destroy her boyfriend to save her own career. "There's something else," Karina continued. "Yesterday, Mrs. Grady asked me to help her document instances of Dr. Dorsey's inappropriate behavior. She wanted me to create a paper trail that would support her harassment claims. Did you do it?" "I started to, but then I realized what she was really asking me to do. She wanted me to help her fabricate evidence against someone she's been having an affair with. That's when I decided to call you." I thanked Karina and assured her that she had done the right thing. Then I drove home to wait for Elise, armed with information that would make our evening conversation very educational indeed. She arrived home at 7:30, looking drained but relieved. "How was your day?" I asked. "Better. The situation at work is resolving itself. It turns out the rumors about inappropriate relationships were true, but not in the way people thought. Dr. Dorsey has been harassing several female staff members, including me. The investigation confirmed it, and he's been terminated." She delivered this explanation with the same tone she might use to discuss quarterly budget reports. Matter of fact, professional, completely believable if you didn't know better. "That must have been difficult for you," I said, "being harassed by a colleague." "It was, but I'm glad I finally found the courage to speak up. These things need to be reported, even when it's scary to do so." I nodded and made appropriate sympathetic sounds while she continued to elaborate on her fictional victimization. She was good at this, I had to admit. If I hadn't spent the last week documenting her actual relationship with Dorsey, I might have believed her myself. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," I said finally. "It takes real integrity to tell the truth, even when it's difficult." Something in my tone must have registered, because she looked at me more carefully. "Tom, is everything okay? You seem different lately." "Do I?" I've been doing some self-reflection, thinking about honesty, integrity, consequences. You know, the values we try to teach young people. "That's good. Self-reflection is important." "It is. For instance, I've been reflecting on our marriage, our communication, our financial arrangements." "What about our financial arrangements?" "Well, I've been wondering why my entire salary goes into our joint account while your income remains separate, and I've been curious about some of the recent withdrawals from that joint account." Her face went very still. Tom, what are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking direct questions and hoping for honest answers. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and what story would work best. The withdrawals were for legitimate expenses, she said finally. Such as? Professional development, courses, conferences, networking events. At the Marriott Hotel? The color drained from her face. Tom, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations. But before you start, let me save us both some time. I went to my study and returned with the folder I had been building for the past week. I set it on the table between us and opened it to the first page. This is a photograph of you and Dr. Dorsey having lunch at Antonio's last Tuesday. This is a bank statement showing a $3,000 transfer from our joint account to your private account on the same day. This is a hotel receipt for room 412 at the Marriott, charged to our joint credit card. I turned the pages methodically, like I was presenting a lesson plan. This is security footage of you and Dr. Dorsey in the hospital parking garage. These are email printouts showing that your harassment claims are fabricated. And this is a complete financial analysis showing that you've stolen nearly $25,000 from our joint account over the past 6 months. Elise sat frozen, staring at the evidence spread across our kitchen table. The question isn't whether you've been having an affair and stealing money, I continued. The question is, what happens next? Tom, please, let me explain. No more explanations. No more lies. No more treating me like I'm too stupid to figure out what's happening in my own marriage. I closed the folder and looked at her directly. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to move out of this house. You're going to remove your name from our joint account, and you're going to repay every dollar you've stolen. And you're going to do all of this quietly, without drama, because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person you really are. You can't do this. Actually, I can, and I will, because unlike you, I believe in consequences. She tried to argue, to negotiate, to manipulate, but I was done listening. 15 years of managing teenagers had taught me that some lessons could only be learned the hard way. The next morning, Elise packed her bags and left. She moved in with Tasha, who was probably getting an education of her own about the consequences of enabling other people's deceptions. Dr. Dorsey, meanwhile, had bigger problems than unemployment. His wife had filed for divorce, and the medical board was reviewing his license. Apparently, fabricating harassment claims was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to his professional misconduct. As for me, I returned to my classroom with a renewed appreciation for the power of truth, the importance of evidence, and the satisfaction that comes from teaching lessons that actually matter. My students noticed the change. Mr. Grady seems happier lately, I overheard Jessica Martinez tell her friend. She was right. I was happier. Because for the first time in months, I was living in a world where actions had consequences, where truth mattered, and where the good guys sometimes actually won. It was the kind of ending that would make even Holden Caulfield proud.